Hi, Matt. Nice to see you again. Hi, William. So be
Okay, so with that, we will go ahead and start the budget orientation process, and I will turn the mic over to Mr. Rose.
Thank you, Chair Hecker. Good evening. Thank you for joining us and for the opportunity to share this orientation with you. I would also like to thank you for volunteering to take on this important work. Before we get started, one thing that we traditionally do at our orientations that I'd like to continue is to actually do a quick introduction for everyone. Let us know if you're the budget committee member or a board member, how long you've been either in that role or, and then maybe if you have kids in the district or how long you've lived in the district. So something quickly like that. I will start to demonstrate. I'm Jim Rose. I've been with the district for 6 years now. Actually, I guess 5.5 years. And I have 2 kids in the district, one at the high school and one at the middle school. And with that, Ryan, can I move along to you?
Sure. So Ryan Dunlap. So I've been part of the budget committee for a couple of years now, I think 3 years. Day job is in accounting and finance at Intel. I've got 3 kids in the district. I've got a 5th grader over at Middleton. I've got a 3rd grader at the Ridges, and then I've got an almost kindergartner who's super excited to go to the Ridges.
I'm Christine Andrig. I am the executive assistant to the superintendent and the board secretary. And I've been with the district just over 3.5 years.
I'm Phil Johansson, Director of Finance for the district, and I've worked here 8 years.
Carrie Bennett, I'm the assistant superintendent, and this is my 13th year in the district.
Hi, good evening. I'm Heather Cordy. I'm the superintendent, and this is my 12th year in this role.
Okay, I'm Sue Hecker. I've been on the school board for 15 years and have 3 children that have graduated from Sherwood schools.
I'm Abby Hawkins. I was new to the school board this year, and I have 3 kids, 2 of which are in schools here, middle and elementary, and 1 that will be in kindergarten next year.
Yeah, Bill Fox. I have 2 kids in the district over at Ridges with Miranda. And I think this is the 3rd year also being in this role.
I'm Krista Thorne. I have 2 boys in the district. We've been here since 2015, but they didn't start till the following year. And this is my 1st year on the board.
Matt Kaufman. This is my first meeting as a budget committee member. And I have one daughter who will be starting kindergarten in the fall here in Sherwood, and another who is very jealous of her big sister.
I'm Jessica Adamson. I've been on the board for 10 years or a little more than that. Been part of this community for over 17 years, and our youngest is a senior at Sherwood High School this year, and have two others that have graduated from the district. So it's really great to be here tonight.
I'm Duncan Nangoro, and I'm a board member here. Been about 9 months, I want to say. So pretty new, and I've got 3 children.
Great, thank you all for that. Let's see if I can get this to advance. There we go. So these are the topics we're going to cover this evening. We'll talk about your role. We'll talk about the economic and revenue forecast, a little bit about enrollment, and we'll finish with just kind of a reminder what our calendar looks like. It's on. You would advance, please. Thank you. So what's the role of the budget committee? The budget committee is the 5 board of directors plus 5 members of the public creating the overall budget committee. And it's a means for the public to participate in the budgeting process. It's really their opportunity to have input and to share their thoughts with you. The committee actually will receive the budget message and the budget document from the district, from the superintendent. That happens at our first budget committee meeting. And then you have the opportunity to review the budget as proposed. Again, you listen to comments from citizens. And if you'd advance, please. And when you're doing that review, it's really about ensuring that the district is planning to spend money consistent with the expressly stated goals. The committee approves the budget at the major fund and function level, and then sets the tax rate. And then once complete, the budget committee refers the budget to the school board, and the school board will then hold another public hearing and actually adopt the budget. The budget committee does not approve new personnel, set salaries and benefits, or contract terms for employees or administrators. It is outside the committee's scope of work to set staffing levels or decide whether or not a service or program should be provided. The budget committee does not make district policy. That lies with the school board. And then the budget committee's work is complete after it has approved a proposed budget. I got a little ahead of myself. These are things that are outside of the scope, so I'm sorry about that. But again, you can see the items that don't fall within the work that we're here tonight and future budget committees for. So let's move on to the economic and revenue forecast. The state of Oregon releases an economic and revenue forecast 4 times per year. The revenue forecasts are used by the legislature in considering how much to appropriate to state programs and K-12 education. And the 3 primary sources of revenue for Oregon schools are from the state general fund, lottery, and then corporate activities taxes. And those funds become part of the state school fund, often referred to as the SSF, and to the student investment account. All right, I'm not sure why it's not. The most recent forecast, which is referred to as the March forecast, even though it came out in February, had promising news for state coffers. Legislators learned that the March economic and revenue forecast showed another large surge in tax collections. General fund and lottery revenues are up a combined $1.173 billion since the December forecast. So that's a 4% growth in just 3 months. And since that previous forecast, the projected personal kicker has almost doubled to $964 million, and the projected corporate kicker has grown by over 150% to about $630 million. While the personal kicker is refunded to taxpayers, the corporate kicker is dedicated to K-12 education. Unfortunately, it's not in a way that guarantees a larger state school fund. It can actually be offset to fund other state general fund needs. The state is only a third of the way through the 21-23 biennial budget period, so our partners across the state expect those numbers to grow in future forecasts. Obviously, the recent spike in gas prices and some of those things will have an effect on future forecasts as well. So to be honest, when I wrote this comment a week ago, I had a little different view on what that next forecast might look like. We will have to wait and see as each of these forecasts comes out what that means. However, with the latest forecast, the state reserve accounts, which includes the Education Stability Fund, the Rainy Day Fund, and cash reserves grew significantly again and are currently projected to top $5 billion during the 21-23 biennium. And that's equivalent to 20% of the general fund budget. And when you add in the strength of the corporate activity tax collections to date, and it is safe to say that Oregon's budget is in the best financial position since the passage of Measure 5 in 1990. The forecast is suggesting continued growth for the state general fund over the next 4 bienniums of greater than 12% per 2-year period. And again, this is something we watch with each passing revenue forecast. So, and I should have said at the very beginning, if you have questions throughout the presentation, please, by all means, just let me know and we can stop and address those. And we will also certainly have time at the end to have questions and discussion. So looking at state lottery fund, it is similar in that state lottery proceeds are expected to grow in each of the next 4 bienniums. Not quite as much in 23-25, but then they're projecting growth of above 6 for the following 3 biennium. And the relatively new piece to all of this is the corporate activity tax. And that is something that has been in place just a few years. It funds the state school fund and the student investment account, and it's expected to grow as well. The rates for the state school fund growth are above 5% in the next biennium and approaching 10% over the following 3 bienniums. For the student investment account, those rates are nearly 10% in the first biennium and 11% after that. So when we look at these last 3 slides together, you can see why it appears that the state budget is in a better position to support schools than it has been in a long time. However, the legislature will ultimately decide where and how to spend those resources, which may or may not be on K-12 education. So changing the topic a little bit here. Now, as we've discussed before, for some of you that have been around, and I'll discuss here again in a moment, enrollment is key to our funding. And there is an interesting trend happening statewide that when combined with the available resources may have an impact on us here in Sherwood. The trend is a decreasing number of students. And we are seeing it locally in our projections, but we also see it regionally and statewide. This data was actually part of the economic and revenue forecast. And the forecasters felt it an important enough trend to call attention to it as part of their report. At July 1, 2018, so just not even quite 4 years ago, there were 636,638 school-aged children in Oregon. This is not necessarily the number of students in public schools, but reflects the actual number of kids ages 5 to 17. This peaked in 2021 with 637,948. But beginning in 2022, the school-age population begins declining each year and is estimated to be 596,947 by 2030. And since our funds are based on a per student allocation, it is possible that we will receive more funding per student because there are fewer students statewide. However, we have seen some decline in student enrollment due to COVID-19 that as of yet has not returned. And the drop due to COVID is something that our neighboring districts, as well as districts statewide, have been seeing. We will have to continue to monitor our enrollment and statewide trends to determine what long-term effect this will have on Sherwood's budget.
Is there, you said that we'll continue to monitor it, but is there a slide coming up where it shows the current that's similar to this, but it's actually kids in public school?
I don't have those numbers in the presentation
Okay.
for statewide public schools.
Okay,
Typically, it's been in the 550,000 range.
okay.
I've not looked at numbers in the last probably year to know exactly what it is.
Okay, thank you.
I can certainly do that. Thank you. So we're going to talk about enrollment, and we're going to cover these items over the next few slides. And as I mentioned on the last slide, enrollment is very important to all districts, as our general fund is supported by the state school fund. And the state school fund is divided across all public school districts based on student enrollment. And that enrollment count is taken twice a year, the first time in October and then again in the spring. When a district is growing, the funding is generally increasing. When a district sees declines in enrollment, then funding is generally decreasing. Now the legislature has the opportunity to adjust per student funding, which can affect the overall resources for a district, even one that's seeing declining enrollment. One challenging scenario for districts is to have declining enrollment and therefore declining funding, while also having costs increasing, which we know for roll-up purposes, we always have, costs that go up. Needless to say, we pay a lot of attention to enrollment numbers for current and future years, which makes the projections critical to our work and your work here as the budget committee. So this is a look at our enrollment the last 3 school years. Our October 1 enrollment, again, key to our ADM reporting with the Department of Education. And March 13th picked because in 2020, it's the day the pandemic began affecting our schools. As you can see, we were in the low 5,000s in 2019-20, that school year. We dropped the following year by about 400 students. 3/4 of those were elementary students, and within that group, 2/3 were in grades kindergarten through 2nd. Our middle school dropped about 75 students, and the high school was nearly even. In this current school year, we started the year with a little more than 90 additional students across the district compared to 2020-2021. Throughout the year, we've added a few elementary students and lost a few high school students, resulting in a small net decline. And that's a pretty typical pattern for our district. The next couple slides are actually data directly from the Davis Demographics Report, which we have in draft form. For those listening that have not heard us speak about Davis Demographics, it is a company that helps us make enrollment projections each year. We have used them for about 5 years now, and their model is based entirely on data and algorithms, which provide a set of projections for the next 10 years. One data point they use is birth rates for our community. And this slide shows the historical birth numbers since 2006. And the leftmost column is the year a child was born. The column next to that is the year the child is expected to enter kindergarten. The third column is the births in our zip code, the 97140 birth code, which generally fits across the district boundaries. The fourth column is the percentage of births in comparison to the reference year noted in the blue row, in this case, 2016. As you can see over the time period of this data collection, we've consistently had fewer and fewer births in our zip code. For the last year of data, 2020, there were 181 births, nearly half as many as in 2006. And this is not the only factor of our kindergarten class size, but it's an important data point. And it actually goes back to directly supporting that previous slide from the economic revenue forecast that shows the declining number of school-aged children. We have fewer births happening and fewer kids entering school. Another key data point for Davis Demographics is grade progression. And so grade progression refers to the movement of students from one grade to the next grade level in the following year. And the grade may increase or decrease based upon birth rates, families, and with children moving into or out of established residences in the district or new residential developments. But you can see along the green line that in Davis's forecast, the kindergarten's estimated to enter the district in the fall of 2022, which is about 275 students, is expected to grow by nearly 100 by the time these kindergartens would enter high school in the fall of 2031. And that's just kind of the natural growth that we see year after year as kids of school age start coming to our district. Another look that the district, another data point that the district monitors comparing graduating high school seniors with the expected incoming kindergartens. For examples, in the red circles, you can see in the 2018-19 school year, 391 seniors graduated. However, the incoming kindergartners replacing those students in the 2019-20 school year was 299, a reduction of in total of 92 students. And the yellow circles show a similar trend. And that is true of the pandemic year, but it's also true of all years in this chart. And the drop in student population is not necessarily a reflection of the district's COVID response. That combined with the green is why we don't have very large senior classes leaving and having a huge drop every year. It's because the grade progression kind of balances some of that out. And so this is all kind of data points that we have to watch and see if those trends continue and make sure that we are making the best projections we can. This view, the other thing it shows, it easily shows the bubble of larger classes we have going through our schools. And at our high school, we have 3 larger classes, the freshmen, sophomore, and seniors. So this is a quick look at new construction and what it can mean to the district in terms of enrollment. The factors for single family detached are derived from the units constructed within the school district boundaries between 1998 and 2018. Due to, frankly, not building enough multifamily units in our community over that same time period to make the data relevant, we actually used, or I should say Davis Demographics uses the Westland-Wilsonville school district numbers. But essentially what we're seeing here is that for every family home built, we can expect a student. And for every multifamily unit, or for every 5 multifamily units, we can expect a student. So if we build 100 homes, we can expect to have about 100 students. If we build 100 apartments, we can expect to have about 20. And this is critical for us to watch, particularly as projects like the Brookman Road work is being done. And we're starting to see some completed homes. We expect those to be sold this summer. And we will actually likely have kids in our buildings in the fall from that work. And then, of course, there is Sherwood West, which we know is quite a large area that the city is working on as a conceptual plan. And that will likely happen over the next decade. We'll start to see some of those homes come online as well. For budgeting and planning purposes, this is the most important data from the Davis Demographics Report. And this is the projection for the next 5 years. Since the Davis Demographics process is data and algorithm driven, the decrease in student population due to COVID may have an outsized effect on the long-term projections. If that is the case, those will work out over the coming years. For this next school year, Davis is projecting 4,640 students across the district, a decrease of 52 students from this year's October 1 number. Interestingly, the number of students is projected to remain in the 4,600 range for the next 6 years, and then it's expected to drop some after that. And again, this doesn't account for the likelihood that Sherwood West will be underway in that 10-year projection cycle. They simply can't account for construction that is not in the planning and permitting phase. It's hard to factor into their algorithms. So. Though it doesn't show in this chart, Davis Demographics also must use this year's number of out-of-district students as their basis for all future years. So if we had 60 out-of-district students attending, they would count that 60 in each of those 10 years. And so that number could change based on the district's decisions about allowing inter-district transfers. So as a comparison to the Davis demographics projections, we have created our own method of making a projection. Ours is built more on historical data and a direct understanding of what is happening within our neighborhoods. We rely heavily on grade progressions and on working directly with our school administrators to identify changes in the community that could affect enrollment. Things like large empty homes that are for sale or families they know are moving out of town. We anticipate 4,652 students next fall based on this process, a decrease again from this year. In that scenario, we'll likely rely on our ADME, which I will explain here in just a few slides. Now, the difference between Davis's numbers and ours is their calculation does not include our year 13 students. And so these are students that come back for additional time to complete their high school studies after their 4th year. When you include those students with the Davis projection, the difference of projection results is about 2 students, which is pretty close and closer than we've been in years past. So I'm going to explain a little bit about basically some terminology that we use quite a bit. And I believe you all have a list of other terms as well that you can refer to in front of you. So ADM, average daily membership, and this is the number of students that are registered in our district, or as I like to say, children in chairs. ADMW, which is average daily membership weighted. And I'm sorry, I use the acronyms because that's like how a lot of us refer to them all the time. We don't tend to say all the words out. So I'll try to be better about that. But ADMW is the number of registered students times a weighting for specific qualified categories. And again, this is something else I will explain here on the next slide. And then the average daily membership extended, or ADME, that's the higher of last year's or this year's ADMW number. And it's really a mechanism to help districts with declining enrollment adjust without having large drops in a given year. And so it's a way to kind of help districts along. So basically, state funding rules recognize that not all students receive the same services, and therefore funding is adjusted to accommodate some of those differences. Essentially, enrollment counts are modified or weighted to adjust the amount of state school fund revenue per student. An enrolled student has a weight of 1. Districts receive additional weights for students that are eligible as English language learners, students with an individualized education program, or students navigating poverty. And you can see the different weights there for each of those. And there are lots of other weights, but those are the 3 big ones that affect us here in Sherwood. The total weight per student cannot exceed 2. So if you have a student who is an English language learner, as well as has an IEP, those 1.5 still comes down to just 1 because you already have a weight of 1. So we're limited to 2.0. And then the total weighted number of students in our district is what I refer to as our average daily membership weighted, or ADMW. As I mentioned, for this next year, we will likely be relying on our average daily membership extended, or ADME. And again, that's looking at which year was higher in terms of enrollment. Was it last year's or this year's? And when I talk about last year, I mean the year we're in, and next year being the budget year we're talking about. So there are a couple of challenges that we face with our ADMW count and with anticipated ADME. First of all is the total number of students across the state. And a change in the total students in the state can increase or decrease state school fund resources per student or per ADMW. And it could be particularly difficult if the state population grows while we see a decline in student enrollment. However, as we mentioned earlier, statewide districts are currently seeing a decline in student enrollment. You may have seen a recent article in the Oregonian about Portland Public Schools dropping dramatically at grades K-8 and holding steady in the high school. And this is pretty similar to what we have seen here in Sherwood schools. The other challenge is that changes within the district don't occur evenly. And so change may be distributed throughout buildings or concentrated in a single building. And likewise, within a building, changes may not impact all grades equally. This can lead to larger or smaller class sizes from one grade to another. And these changes are evaluated by the district in setting staffing levels for the budget or adjusting staffing levels throughout the school year if necessary. And for budgeting purposes, we continue to monitor enrollment and adjust staffing during the budget development cycle as needed. And if decreases are necessary, we always hope to do that through attrition. And these are the kind of remaining key dates for our budget. The first three listed are for this group. And then the final date is when the board will hopefully publicly adopt the budget. And we have 3 dates listed. First budget committee meeting on the 18th of April, and then the 25th of April and May 2nd are held if additional budget committee meetings are needed. And then you can see our next economic and revenue forecast is estimated to come out May 16th. They haven't actually announced a date yet. So, and with that, I would open it up to questions or comments. Matt.
On an earlier slide, it said that our task is to evaluate the budget to ensure that it's in line with district either policies or priorities, I can't remember, as explicitly stated. Where are they explicitly stated? What are we managing to?
You're managing to the strategic plan, which is something that we will show you as part of the budget committee, or excuse me, the budget committee work in April. And it's our kind of framework that we follow to make sure that we are targeting the most important things, most important items that we need to do to help students learn. And we adjust that annually. We report to the board kind of on a regular basis as well. But you'll see how we have identified those in that process.
Perfect. Thank you.
I'm sorry. It is a lot of information, and that's one of the reasons we like to have an orientation now to give you kind of that high background stuff, because by the time we get to April and we want to meet with you, there's some nitty gritties to go through, and just looking at the major fund and function level, which is not really in the weeds of the budget, is a lot of information to absorb as well. So we appreciate the time tonight to be able to share with some of this, because the background stuff, particularly enrollment, which is so key, and kind of the state look, it's just really helpful to being in a position to make good decisions further on.
Other questions? Awesome. Great. Thank you, Mr. Ross. Oh, I guess.
I didn't know. Do we just jump in with questions?
Please
I
do.
I didn't want to be rude and just jump in, but so the I don't know what the word is, the accumulation of students as you progress up through the different grades. Is there an understanding of what is it? Just people who have student age children tend to move to Sherwood, and they do so midway through the.
I think there's a
their school
variety of
progression,
factors
or-
that affect that. Some of it is that I think we have some more established communities or neighborhoods. And so maybe young families aren't moving into those quite yet, and it's families that have kids that are a little bit older. Another place where we see like a fairly significant jump is from 8th grade to 9th grade, because you have students returning from maybe a private school that goes through 8th grade or a charter school. In some cases, homeschooled students, then the parents want them to attend a public high school. So you see those kinds of growth at various spots throughout the 12 years.
That's why high school tends to be a little more stable than some of the lower grades. Just
I think that's why we see some growth at 9th grade, from 8th to 9th. Yeah. Good question.
Yeah, I have a question just with regards to, we know enrollment numbers are key, right? And so my question is more so about the neighboring districts and how what we see from enrollment projections and kind of what they're seeing. Because we know one of the slides that you showed we won't get back to pre-COVID numbers until probably like 3 or 4 years from now, right?
Mhm.
And is that similar to what other districts are seeing?
I'm not sure about their kind of long-term projections of 3 and 4 years out. They have seen the same kind of decreases in students over the last 2 years that we have, and not seen all of those students come back the way we have either. So I think our expectation from talking to our peers is that we're all hoping to grow, but at this point, we're all a little bit nervous that the growth hasn't returned as quickly as we'd like. Which is one of the reasons that kind of that statewide look is so important to us, because if we're not growing and nobody else is growing, that has an effect on the ADM weight for all of us. If we were kind of stagnant with our growth, but everybody else was gaining a bunch of students, then that means we're going to get less per kid. And so we kind of watch that constantly.
And that was going to be my question. So the real risk there is that we see a trend that goes in the opposite direction of the statewide trend, as opposed to if everybody loses students in a proportionate manner, then there's no real the allocation is still made proportionately. And so the only big budgetary risk is if Sherwood sees a decline while no one else sees a decline. If everybody sees the same proportionate decline, then the allocation will just kind of it'll wash out across all the different districts. Is that understanding correctly?
Yes, that is.
I would just add to that. I think that's very accurate. I think the difference is as long as the legislature continues to allocate the same amount of money to a decreasing amount of students, which is another factor, we just don't know what that looks like over time.
So is there there's a legal requirement to fund at a certain, so the overall pot could change. Oh, the overall pot could change. So that's the risk. That's one risk. And then the allocation could change if our student mix differs from. So there's kind of two separate risks out there
I would
keep
say
in
that's
mind.
accurate. That's how I've been thinking of it. Exactly.
Perfect. Thank you.
But to be very clear, there is no statutory requirement that the legislature fund education at any particular level. So they can go up and down as they see fit based on economic reasons. So
Is it, sorry, I'm new, so I have a lot of questions. Are they required to allocate in proportion to the ADME number, or is that could the allocation mechanism change, or is that a statutory mechanism?
they can change the mechanism to some extent. They tweak it from time to time based on new factors and stuff, but generally it's fairly steady. Jessica, you'd love to jump in. I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, so they can change the weights, or they can eliminate the weights altogether. That's entirely within their control. But there is no requirement that they fund at least X amount per ADMR or ADME. They can do whatever they want on that front. And then I think the thing that we're really watching right now, so the student investment account that's funded by the corporate activities tax, there is nothing requiring the state to say, well, you funded X amount of billions of dollars before, and so this is on top of that. They can say, well, that was really interesting, but now the cat's bringing in a lot, so we're going to back out this general fund, and it'll be, so we're not actually giving you more money. Instead, we're going to restrict the uses for this new money.
Yeah, so the discretionary stuff.
Right, so you still have the same budget challenges with additional restrictions. That's the part that I think school boards around the state are watching, is the state going to hold true and add this as new money for us to make truly new investments? Or are they going to back out resources in the long run? Right now, they have what I refer to very technically as crazy money. This is what's happening with these forecasts is crazy. we've never seen something like this happen. And I've spent 25 years watching these forecasts, and this is crazy money. But eventually it goes away, right? So that's the challenge. And so what happens when the economy turns is the big question.
Okay, everybody else set? Okay, thank you, Mr. Rose.
Thank you.
And that concludes our budget committee orientation. So thank you. We'll see you all in April.